Psalm 51. Believe it or not, we're almost to the end. In verse 16, David makes a request, and we talked about it last time. But just because it needs the context, look with favor on Zion and help her. One quick thing there. Maybe the most offered prayer of all, for all of everybody I know, and I think for probably everybody, is help. It's pretty significant prayer. And one of the reasons is because everybody needs help. In our pride, we don't like to admit that. I hated asking for help. It's a weakness, and I think a character flaw in me. Maybe you can relate to that, but it's a good prayer. Look with favor on Zion and help her. Rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. We talked about the walls of your Jerusalem, the boundaries, the protective boundaries. In verse 19, then you'll be pleased with sacrifices offered in the right spirit, with burnt offerings and whole burnt offerings. If you don't have background in the Mosaic law, that is not going to make any sense to you. When this is generally true in the Old Testament, when we look at the all of it, of the Old Testament, what we have is the Old Testament, what ancient Jews called the Bible. They didn't even call it the Bible. That was a term that came later. Anyway, okay. If we don't frame it up against the culture in which it was written, you're going to miss the meaning. And so what David is saying is, earlier he said, well, let me just read it. You do not want a burnt offering. The sacrifice you desire is a broken spirit. You will not reject a broken and repentant heart, O God. Now he says, then, once you, God, look with favor on Zion and help her and rebuild the walls of Jerusalem, then you will be pleased with sacrifices offered in the right spirit. As a Christian, on this side of the cross, where Jesus fully and completely fulfilled the law, according to Paul in the book of Galatians, he nailed it to the tree, to the cross. I don't think we talk, well, my experience is we don't talk very much about sacrifice. And when we talk about sacrifice, it's not really in the same context as what David was talking about here. In the Old Testament world, to bring a sacrifice, there were certain specifications and requirements for sacrifices. They had to be the best of your flock and herd. So you couldn't haul in some mangy, subpar livestock and say, this is my offering, this is my sacrifice. It had to be your best. Oh, and by the way, when you made that sacrifice, when you made that offering, you were saying goodbye to any profit that you could have gained from it. Now, if you're a farmer or have farming background, you can understand this is no small thing. I have a friend who, this was gosh, 60 years ago now, but almost 60. He raised show cattle, and way back then, in the late 60s, he would win. This was in Oklahoma, the Oklahoma State Fair and the Tulsa State Fair, the two big fairs in Oklahoma, and he would win grand champion. And then he would sell that cow or bull for thousands of dollars. Pretty, I mean, think back to what $1,000 did in 1968. The first new car I ever bought cost, I think, $1,600. So that's the kind of animal that this sacrifice called for. You know, it wasn't just let's get rid of that one because they're just a boat anchor in the herd, right? They're just consuming feed. Nope, the best. Then you will be pleased with sacrifices. And then he qualifies it. Offered in the right spirit. So what's a right spirit? When you make an offering to God, you make a sacrifice to God. Well, I think honest humility. The reason that you would have made a sacrifice in David's day, there's basically two broad kinds of sacrifices. One was a fellowship offering. This was an offering of gratitude for God's goodness and his mercy. Second was a sin offering. This was, I don't know a better way to say it. There probably is a better way. But in payment for sin I have committed. In both of those cases, a right spirit is required. Oh, by the way, and you remember this back here where am I? Yeah, here we go. This is in verse 9 and verse 10, where David, what we have as verses, David just wrote it. Create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a loyal spirit within me. Well, other versions, this is the New Living Translation, but other versions say renew a right spirit within me. Well, now he says God will be pleased with sacrifices offered in the right spirit. Now let's think about this in our lives, right? There is no temple. We have no altar of burnt offerings. We do not offer animals. So what sacrifices? Well, what's it look like? When was the last time I brought a sacrifice to God? Well, I don't, this feels pretty thin and flimsy, but I have occasionally sacrificed my time and my effort in order to reach out to someone, to help someone, to care about someone on behalf of Jesus. To me, it doesn't feel much like a sacrifice to give to God money that he's entrusted me to use. Truth is, I've not really gone without. those are the two basic ways. And I don't even think this is a bad deal. I think when we bring an offering to God, what pleases him now is the same thing that pleased him then. Was it the sacrifice itself? Was it the offering? Was it the animal? What? No, it's the right spirit, offered in the right spirit. What's the right spirit for me? When I don't give my offering in the physical, I don't write a check or drop dollars in an offering plate. I do this electronically, and works very well for me. I don't know whether it will for you, and people may have all kinds of reasons why that's not the right way. Honestly, that's not how I look at it. And I don't want to be mean, but have your opinion. My opinion is it's working for me. And I think as long as my spirit is right, it pleases God. Remember, I said, I think the two conditions for a right spirit are honest humility. Let's talk about honesty for a minute. There are, believe it or not, there are not very many clinical experiments regarding honesty. It's I think it's safe to say it's a quite under-researched concept. But those studies that have been done are in unison that we think we're more honest than we really are. That doesn't surprise me in light of my own life and in light of my counseling career. A whole lot of people who come to me as a client are not trying to be dishonest. They just don't even realize that they're not honest. They're not honest with themselves. And in couples counseling, they're not honest with their spouse. One of the many, many defining marks of the life of Jesus was his total and absolute honesty. There is nothing about Jesus that is not fully and completely honest. I want to be like Jesus, which means my honesty, the fruit of this right spirit, maybe the better way, the root of, not the fruit, would be, I want to become like Jesus, and that means I've got to grow in my honesty. Out of honesty, I think, comes humility. When I honestly see myself for who I am and how I have conducted my life, I think that, I'll just say in my life, that promotes humility. I'm not all that. I'm a person like me should be humble. A person like you should be humble too. So I guess the challenge for today from this one verse is pursue real, solid, complete honesty with God, with yourself, with others, which will produce humility. And in my opinion, that's at the root, that's at the heart of a right spirit. Okay, time's up. See you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.